Good morning and welcome to the Peorian. I'm your host, Paul Gordon. So where are you going to be next Saturday? I mean, surely the date of October 20th has been imprinted on your brain for at least a year, right? No? Well, what's magic about that date, you ask? Why, it's the date the new Peoria Riverfront Museum and the Caterpillar Visitor Center open to the public. I don't mean to seem facetious about it. It is a big deal for Peoria and for the entire region. When they cut the ribbons on those two facilities next Saturday, it will be the culmination of more than 12 years of work. 12 years of blood, sweat, and tears flowing, hairs being pulled or turning gray, of big dreams that many never thought would be realized, finally coming to fruition. Yes, October 20th, 2012 will be an important date in the history of our fair city, and it will bring another jewel to our downtown riverfront, making it even more of a tourist attraction and opening a door even more for those looking for a quality way of life in a quality city. I really doubt that there is anybody more excited about next Saturday or who has lost more sleep in the last 12 years than Jim Richerson. He came to Peoria 12 years ago with orders to expand the local museum. He expanded it. He's my guest on the Peorian today, and we'll chat when we come back. Welcome back to the Peorian. My guest today is Jim Richerson, the president and CEO of the new Peoria Riverfront Museum, which opens to the public next Saturday. Jim, I really don't know what to say except, wow, it's finally here.
Well, it has had an amazing wow factor, and I'm glad to hear you say that, Paul.
You're not too excited about it yourself, are you?
I am ecstatic. I mean, for me, this project and this building has been in my head for years, and to actually walk through it, it's just fabulous.
Rather than go into details about what's in the museum and what's in the Cat Visitor Center, because every media outlet in the area has covered it, and we will be covering it, I would like, if you would, walk us through the last 12 years. Will you do that?
Sure, I'd be glad to.
The 12 years that you have been working toward this, well, did the time fly or did it crawl?
It depends. It depends on the situation. I was recruited to come here. I was in an art and history museum in upstate New York, and I had the opportunity to come to Peoria. I certainly am born and bred in Chicago, so it was an opportunity for me to return to the Midwest after about 10 years. But came here, and I was fascinated by the idea of this multifaceted museum. Lakeview being a museum that handles art and science and history and natural history and things like that. And so when I did my research in the museum, I really wanted to understand what this multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary idea was, and I also wanted to know what were the ideas and the seeds that put that together. I mean, now, over 50 years ago, you think about those people and how insightful they were. So, you know, you look at a lot of cities the size of Peoria, and they have art museums and science museums and natural history museums, and they struggle. There's a lot of different institutions like that. And so I take my hat off to the people 50 years ago that had this idea to pull these different disciplines together under one roof. And when I came here, there was, you know, certainly Lakeview was looking at an extension. The Peoria Historical Society was looking at the possibility of joining something to make something happen on then the Sears block, which is now history. The Regional Museum Society had been a group that was always trying to get, you know, museum ideas together. The IHSA was thinking about a sports museum. There were a lot of entities talking about the idea of museums. And so with that in hand, and my taking a deep look at Lakeview, it was like, well, what's possible here, this collaboration? What can we do? It was very strategic. On August 30th, 2000, Congressman Ray LaHood got a number of us together in his office and basically said, hey, what can we do together? And so I came at it from Lakeview's point of view and this idea of this interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary museum, and all the others had aspirations. And from that seed, we now have the block and this cultural corporate partnership with Caterpillar, which is quite unique. When
Lakeview hired you, didn't they say that one of the things they wanted you to look at was expanding Lakeview?
Yes, in the park. They actually had plans together for an expansion in the park onto the existing building.
So as far as Lakeview is concerned, what we have now down on the Sears block.
Wasn't on the
even in
radar
picture.
screen. Wasn't on the radar screen. Wasn't on my radar screen. I mean, I've had the opportunity to do museum projects all over the world, and we thought we would come here, we'd get this expansion done and move on to the next project. That expansion was probably in the scope of $8 to $12 million, and you know, we sit a very short time away from opening a $140 million project. So, you know, pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It truly is amazing. And I like to always say, you know, being a Chicago kid, Daniel Burnham was one of my heroes, and certainly we all know the adage that Burnham said, make no little plans. And that's the case here for sure.
Nobody has been probably at the forefront of this plan more than you have, they?
Well, Paul, thanks. I have certainly enjoyed a leadership position from this in the beginning, but I would be remiss not to point out that there's been a great team behind this. I always like to say there's no I in team. And it's been a wonderful group of people that have put their egos and differences aside to make this tremendous project a reality.
You want to name anybody, or are you afraid of leaving somebody out?
Well, you know, it's just certainly the Peoria Historical Society, the African American Hall of Fame Museum, the Regional Museum Society people, the the Illinois High School Association, the Nature Conservancy. You know, we've had help from our friends at the Smithsonian Institution. So there's so many involved. You know, the city has stepped up in terms of the property. The county has stepped up in terms of the referendum. We've had some great friends down at the State House that allowed us to get the law changed. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit more. But you know, there's been a lot of people who have helped make this what it is.
Real quick, was there any time in the last 12 years, especially after this project got started, that you ever once considered throwing in the towel?
There were times when I didn't think the project would happen.
Okay.
Towards the end of 2007, things looked pretty dark. We had pretty much run out of public funding options. We had thought that we were going to be able to secure substantial grants from the state of Illinois and some substantial federal grants, and those things just simply dried up. You know, we really hit some hard financial times. We had looked at models across the country where museums had received, you know, substantial amounts of state and federal money, and those times ended. And of course, we all know what happened in 2008. You know, we were at a loss where to go. Caterpillar was frustrated, as were we. We were supposed to open in 2007, and we didn't have a clear line of sight and how to get that done. So we needed to find a different formula for funding.
Okay. When we come back, we're going to talk about the financing problems that plagued the project at first, and how you, the community, helped it get over the hump. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Peorian. I'm with Jim Richerson, CEO of the Peoria Riverfront Museum, which opens next Saturday. Jim, what was the big break as far as getting the financing in order to make this happen? Was it the commitment from Caterpillar, and do you believe it was that commitment that convinced the voters to go ahead and approve the sales tax increase?
Well, I think the big break really came before that.
Oh, okay.
The big break really, it was kind of a moment of truth. We were talking about 2007 and how dark things were looking. We needed to find a different mechanism for public funding. Certainly, Caterpillar was fully on board, and it was amazing what they provided. We had tapped a number of major local funders, and they were tapped out. In 2007, we had really a pretty steep economic, drop. We needed an element of public funding to push us over the top. And so it was searching to find what that would be. The city had given us the property, which was great, the tax incremental financing, which is a part of it, some of the work on the streets, which was great. But how we were going to get, we had about a $35 to $40 million gap in terms of what we had planned. And when you look at projects like this around the country, 100, 150, 200, 300 million dollar projects, there's often a public component. And so that component became how we could tap the sales tax, which was a tax that any user would then help pay. And so that was the formula. We worked with Senator Kaler and Representative Leach from Springfield, and what we were able to do was tap the sales tax that's normally used for counties for public safety. And the idea was to create a public facility tax from sales tax. And so we had to work with our friends down in Springfield to create a bill so each county would have the possibility to do a referendum to do that. We worked all through 2008 to get that created. CAT gave us another year to figure out the funding, which was great. And we got the bill all the way through the legislature. It got to the end of the year. Our then Governor Blagojevich was not going to sign the bill. And then fortuitously, 7 or 8 days before he was indicted, a group from the various labor groups here went down into his office and said, hey, Governor, this is not about raising our taxes. This is about allowing the people of Peoria to vote to see whether they wanted to raise their own taxes. And Governor Blagojevich signed the bill. And then we went back to the county in early January 2009. The county allowed us to put it on the ballot, and then the fund began. So from January 20th to April 7th, I gave about 104 public presentations to make that happen. And it was a pretty amazing time. A lot of dialogue. The economy was still slipping downwards. The local labor groups here stepped up in a big way. All of our partnering organizations stepped up in a big way. You'll need to check my numbers, but there was something like 30,200 votes cast, and we won by 416 votes, or just over 1%. Pretty amazing time. And again, if you look across the country, there were maybe a dozen referenda held, and only 1 or 2 of them were successful, and ours was one of them. Pretty amazing when you think about it.
Election day, spring 2010. What kind of day was that for you and the other supporters? Pins and needles?
Pins and needles. Totally pins and needles. I remember, spending the weekends before canvassing the houses in my neighborhood. I know that a lot of our friends were really, very interested, very worried about what was going to happen. Just before the election, Caterpillar had to lay off about 5,000 people. It was a lot of timing, was just really intense. And I know every public presentation getting closer and closer to April, it got more and more intense. It got more and more angry. People were saying, is this really what we should be spending our money for? Also, Jim Owens, who was the CEO at the time of Caterpillar, Jim only went public twice, but both times he did, he said, look, I'm not going to ask anybody how to vote, and I don't mean to speak for Jim Owens, but he said, Caterpillar is going to build the visitor center if the museum is successfully funded. Caterpillar's visitor center is really about the quality of people that work for Caterpillar, and the museum is the only partner Caterpillar is going to build with, because the museum is about the quality of people in central Illinois. Caterpillar at that time had nearly $50 million on the table in terms of an investment, and I don't think it didn't hurt to have that message. But, it was important. And the people voted, and in many ways we voted our own economic stimulus package.
We're going to take a break now for some messages, and when we come back, we'll talk about the construction of Museum Square and about opening celebration plans. But first, here is Kevin Kaiser to talk about what's going on in the literary world.
Hey, welcome to me. This week I'm going to talk about 2 books by 2 local authors. The first book is The Wreck of the Columbia, written by Ken Zursky. On the evening of July 5, 1918, a steamboat called Columbia was returning to Peoria after a moonlight excursion on the Illinois River with 500 passengers on board, most from Pekin. But it never made it to the shore as a limb tore through the hull of the steamboat, causing it to list and sink very quickly. What was a peaceful midnight cruise on the Illinois turned into a nightmare, with 78 people dying that night. And what's astonishing about the wreck is that there's really nothing astonishing about it at all. One minute the steamboat was cruising along peacefully, the next it's collapsing and breaking up in the river. Afterwards, the wreck made national news and was called Peoria's Titanic. To this day, it's the worst maritime disaster on the Illinois River. Zursky charts the story chronologically, beginning with the moment the captain sensed a problem, to the horrors of the cries and screams in the night, to the courageous actions of the rescue and recovery workers, and ultimately to the pursuit of the truth by law enforcement individuals. So that's The Wreck of the Columbia by Ken Zursky, which you can find locally at Barnes & Noble and on Amazon.com. The second book is Why to Major in English If You're Not Going to Teach by Rob Prescott, who is the chair of Bradley University's English department. Writing the book was a bit of a catharsis for Prescott, who has heard that common question, why hire an English major, from everyone from parents to employers. Prescott's answer is simple. English majors gain skills that are key to a successful business career. English majors are natural readers and info hounds who are trained to think deeply about what they read. And they are then capable of sharing their ideas with others through the written and spoken word, which is becoming even more important in these days of emoticons and vowel-less texts. Prescott talks about another important skill English majors learn, empathy. Great writers have empathy, and it shows in their work. And it takes empathy to communicate your message to an audience, which is very important in the business world. In the book, Prescott also presents his English Major Hall of Fame, which includes songwriters Paul Simon and Chris Christopherson, actors Paul Newman and Harrison Ford, and sports figures like John Wooden and Bart Giamatti. Roughly 70% of English majors are employed in business or public service, and this book explains how the English major curriculum provides students with the transferable skills they need to thrive in their chosen careers. So there you go, 2 local books by 2 local authors. The Wreck of the Columbia by Ken Zersky, and Why to Major in English If You're Not Going to Teach by Rob Prescott, available at bookish and wordy stores everywhere. That's all for me. See you next week, suckers.
Welcome back to the Peorian. I'm your host, Paul Gordon, and my guest today is Jim Richerson, the very excited CEO of the new Peoria Riverfront Museum. Jim, as with any major project, the cost of the museum square fluctuated quite a bit in the early going, and in the end, you did have to trim some of the initial plans back. But you're still very satisfied with what the public's going to walk into next Saturday, right?
Well, that process of trimming things back, I think really what that accomplished is we right-sized the museum
Right-sized
for
it?
the community.
Okay.
Every square foot has a cost to it, and although it was painful, I think that we got it right. I mean, time will tell, but we were at 110,000 square feet. Now we argue back and forth, whether it's 82, 84, 86. A lot of discussion between net square footage and gross square footage. But I think as a whole, we went through a process that made the museum better.
Okay. Now that you can look back on the last couple of years especially, basically construction time, what would you say was the toughest thing that you had to deal with during the construction and the most pleasant thing that happened? Can you quantify it that way?
That's hard. I think the toughest thing is just the sheer number of details that have to be handled at the same time. I mean, you're integrating the construction crews, exhibit crews, planning, staff. You've got county officials who want to have input, city officials who want to have input, lots of board members with great ideas. It's sort of like this super circuit that has to kind of integrate all of these things happening. And that can be pretty tough, especially when certain ideas don't win out or don't come to fruition the way it goes. The happiest moments for me were being on the site and seeing different people working on different aspects of the project, and they'd have eureka moments like, oh, this is what this is. Oh, this is the theater, And we last year, because we kept running into people and they saying, well, Jim, what's going to be in this ellipse? What is this all about? So we did a PowerPoint for it. We invited all the construction workers to lunch in the garage, and we did this PowerPoint. And it was just like a eureka moment for the 50, 60, 70 people that were there saying, nobody's ever done this for us before. Nobody's ever told us the nuts and bolts of what we're building and what's going to come out of it. That was really great for me. I really enjoyed that. And now, as seeing people more and they say, really understand what we're working, what we're building. And then you have, some follow-ups. Like we did a follow-up tour for the IBEW folks. And going through, and they're looking up at the ceiling because we didn't close the ceilings off, and they're seeing all their pipe work, and they're like, "Yeah, everybody can see our artwork." It's really great because we left those ceilings open so we can, attach things in the future. So it was just staying in touch with a lot of people and having so many eureka moments. I'd see that with other people. People would see PowerPoint presentation and then be in the building on tours and just say, I get it now, I understand it. And for me as well, looking at plans and then actually seeing things come out of the ground, a lot of magic and all that stuff. We've probably taken almost 2,000 people through the building on construction tours. It's really been great.
And you still have probably some to go in the next few days.
Well, our plan, we have a whole series of soft openings. Our first soft opening was we had all of the people who built the building come in. And so it was great for them to see, it was kind of a teaser moment. But all the way up through the opening, we have our plans. We'll get about 5,000 people through there before the official opening October 20th. So it's really a way to engage the public, a way to thank everyone who supported us, a way for people who didn't support us to say, hey, this should have been something we should support. And going into the future, how this whole thing is going to serve the community even better.
What can we expect to see next Saturday during the celebration?
Well, I'm imagining, Paul, we're going to see a lot of people. It'll really be great. Early in the morning, there's a special opening between the museum and Caterpillar officials. A lot of elected officials will be there. But 10 o'clock, the fun will begin. The museum's doors and the Caterpillar Visitor Center's doors will open. There will be an admission charge. But we'll have a lot of people on hand. There'll be a lot of things going on the outside. We've got some of Carl Cannon's kids there, the drumming corps. We're going to have a group of square dancers in the auditorium. So a lot of festivities happening. So if you don't get inside, there will be a lot of things, cool things to check out outside. And the museum will be in teaser mode, so you can really come in and look, check it out. We're hoping that a lot of people will join and be members. And of course, then you can come to the museum as many times as you want in the future. So it should be a really great festive day, and of course a real time to celebrate. I mean, those that remember the Sears block and what we've turned it into, it's really pretty phenomenal. I mean, there's nothing cookie cutter about what we did down there. It was really developed by the people of Peoria. It's about the people of Peoria, and it will certainly show Peoria's vision to the world. In many ways, what we've done, we've built our stage to the world.
Okay. Thanks for being here.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
It's great. We hardly scratched the surface, Paul.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah.
And thank you for watching today. I hope we were able to give you some insight on how the new Peoria Riverfront Museum and Caterpillar Visitor Center came to be, and that you are excited about the opening in 6 days. You can watch this and previous episodes of The Peorian on our website, thepeorian.com, and tune in next Sunday at 8 a.m. for another episode of The Peorian. Have a good week.
Música